Good afternoon and welcome to the seminar on Bridging the Global Divide, the Global Digital Divide for Women and Girls through Multilateral Diplomacy. This event is co-sponsored by the Future of Diplomacy Program Project, the Center for Public Leadership, and the Women in Public Policy Program. My name is Khadija Jallo, and I'm a Master in Public Policy student here at Harvard Kennedy School. My interests are in African political and economic integration and the intersection of human rights and technology. Before we begin, be aware that this session is being recorded and that your image may appear in the recording and that we may post this video on the Belfer Center's website. While this virtual event is on record, the event organizers prohibit any attendees, including journalists, from audio-visual recording or distributing parts or all of the event without prior written authorization. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. I'm sorry about the mispronunciation, I'm sure, virtually to the Kennedy School. Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka is the former United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women from 2013 to 2021. She was born in 1955 in Claremont, KwaZulu-Natal. After matriculating from Olange High School, she was awarded her bachelor's degree in the arts and education at the National University of Lesotho. She further obtained a qualification in gender policy and planning from the University College London, a master's degree in philosophy from the University of Cape Town, and a doctorate in technology and education from Warwick University, not to mention a number of honorary degrees from universities around the world. Through her illustrious career, she has directed her energy towards issues of human rights, equality, and social justice, with an emphasis on gender equality and youth development. She's been an educator in South Africa, established a global program for young women as coordinator at World YWCA, spearheaded TEAM, an organization that focuses on upskilling women, and founded World University Service in South Africa that promoted literacy and rural development. She's worked tirelessly on programs and policies to reduce inequality throughout her political career. In South Africa, she's held positions as Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, as Minister of Minerals and Energy, and she was also Deputy President of South Africa, making her the highest ranking female political leader in the country's history. As head of UN Women, she's led the organization's innovative work, transforming social inequalities and discriminatory norms, driving men and boys' engagement in gender equality through initiatives like the He for She campaign, and influence advertising norms for positive change and equal representation. She's also successfully mobilized a historic $40 billion in financial commitments from member states and private and public stakeholders to form generational equality to drive transformative change for women and girls around the world. And this is just a fraction of the amazing work that she has accomplished. We are so lucky to have her as a Hauser leader here at Harvard Kennedy School Center for Public Leadership. And today we're especially fortunate to welcome her to this session. Erika Manouselis will be moderating this discussion. She is the manager of the Future of Diplomacy project. Erika, over to you.
Thank you so much, Khadija, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this seminar. I'm Erika Manouselis, and I have the pleasure of moderating this event with our distinguished guests today. So thank you, Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka, for being here with us at the Kennedy School. And thank you also to Annie Trenke for her support in making this event possible. So we heard a little bit about your background, your amazing experience from Khadija's introduction. And I'd like to begin by asking you to elaborate a little more on your career path and what drew you to public service, and how has your experience informed your vision and your work at UN Women?
Thank you very much, and good day to the audience. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here in Harvard. Well, I really started as a teacher. That's what I was trained to do. And I had gone to a high school called Otlanga High School, and I went to teach to that high school after I graduated. And that is a high school that has an honor of having been found by the first president of the ANC. So a very prestigious high school from that perspective. But working with students and young people at that time when apartheid was quite intense in South Africa, exposed me to the importance of good and quality education and the importance of fighting for that education, something that I tried to impress upon my students. But I also worked with the young people in the YWCA, young women in particular, and I worked globally because this was for the World YWCA, and that broadened my perspective. And as I worked for the YWCA, I was continuing to campaign for South Africa. At that time, we needed the international community to support the sanctions against South Africa. We needed to also make sure that, for instance, groups in the church sector understood the armed struggle in South Africa, which, as you can understand, in that sector is not an easy thing to embrace. And then, of course, after I went back to South Africa again, I worked in the communities in all types of situations, but a lot with women and youth. And then I ended up in government in the first democratic parliament, the one that was led by President Nelson Mandela. And I became a minister of trade and industry, sorry, deputy minister of trade and industry, a minister of minerals and energy, and a deputy president. And after that, I left the public service and started my foundation, Mlambo Foundation. And at the same time, I also registered to do my PhD, which is the one that brought me very close to technology, because my research was on education and technology. And at the end of my studies, literally as I was going to defend my thesis, I then got a phone call from Secretary General Ban Ki-moon asking me to apply for the job at UN Women, and the rest is history. And that's how I got to UN Women.
Thank you so much. So you spoke a little bit about growing up during apartheid. I understand you were a student during the Soweto Youth Uprising in 1976. For those in the audience that don't know, it's when thousands of Black South African high school students protested the inequities of the Bantu education system, specifically a government decree that forced all Black schools to use Afrikaans and English for instruction. And hundreds of unarmed protesters were killed by the police. So I'd like to sort of ask you some more about how your experience growing up during that time and seeing the protests informed your vision of how an education can be a positive social transformation, because of course under that system it was a negative transformation.
Yeah, so in 1976, I was already a university student, so that must just tell you how ancient I am. I was doing my first year, and we all were shocked to see what happened in Soweto, the killing of students. And we stood in solidarity with those young students, not just my university, which was the University of Zululand, but all universities around South Africa. And most of the universities at that time were closed as a result, because the universities were generally ungovernable, and they were closed indefinitely. And I then decided at that time to go and look for education elsewhere, because it was clear that it was going to be difficult to get back to university in South Africa. So I ended up in Lesotho, which is a neighboring country, and that's where I finished my bachelor's degree. And I think that was a blessing for me in a way, because in that university and environment, there were a lot of other students who came from all over the country who ended up in Lesotho. it was also before the liberation of Zimbabwe and Namibia. And there were lots of students from those two countries who were also in Lesotho. So we sort of had a base, if you like, in Lesotho of students who came from countries that were struggling for their liberation, and we fed on each other in many ways. It was also an opportunity to meet fellow South Africans who were already in exile, who were parts of the liberation movements, and to be much more engaged with the struggle against South Africa. I was conscious at the time that I did not want to go into exile. I wanted to go back to South Africa. So sort of had to manage my engagement so that I do not put myself in a situation that would make it impossible to go back to South Africa. So that when I finished studying in Lesotho, I was then able to go back to South Africa. But really the big learning for me at that time was the importance of student politics and the resilience of students, both the students that could still return to South Africa and those that were already in exile. Ours was not just to fight for education at that point. It was really now focused on fighting for the country and trying to make the apartheid system unworkable.
It's a really amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. So you spoke about your dissertation a little bit. I would like to ask you more about that. So you wrote it on training teachers in information communications technology for mobile learning programs in 16 underserved South African schools, sorry. Can you talk a little bit about your research and how you envision leveraging the relationship between technology and education to ameliorate gender inequality? You mentioned about how the importance of student politics just now. So how does that tie in? And how did your vision translate into policy on the global scale?
So after I had been in government in South Africa and exposed to the importance of technology, and very much aware that I did not know enough about technology. And I'm not a techie, but I was concerned about the policy and its application, as well as the intersection between technology and all other policies, because as you know, everyone needs technology, whether you are going to be selling sweets on the streets, or you are going to be studying biblical studies, or you are going to be studying languages. Technology is important. And I wanted to look at how we could make access to technology to be something that every student would access, so that as they progressed with their education, technology has become second nature. At that time, and very much still even now, our schools didn't have the infrastructure. Our teachers were not trained. So that was really a big dream with no real possibility. And my studying was looking at how do you transform the learning environment to make that possible. At that time also, mobile technology had penetrated a lot in South Africa. So I was conscious that if there was one form of technology that most of the people in South Africa, in the school ecosystem and in community in general, had, it was a mobile phone. So my studies looked at education as well as the mobile phone specifically as the technology that people already possessed. And I hoped that we could use that to inform our policy and see how we utilize the technology that both the students and the teachers already have. What was also critical to understand was that most of our students in the rural areas, even though they had the technology, connectivity was a problem. So how do you also deal with those issues? And most of the policies of the countries were made at the time of the desktop. So we were already using telephones and handsets, and the policies of our countries as far as technology was concerned, we're still talking about the desktop. So getting our technologies, our policies rather, to move faster and be at the same place as where the schooling community and the people who are studying or teaching were, was one of the aims of my studies. And of course, I can't say I succeeded in convincing the authorities about all of the recommendations I came up with, but not just myself, many other people who were studying the same issues at the time. I think we sort of added our voices and hopefully made the transformation faster and possible, but there were a lot of other people who did even more robust work than my work, who I think has helped our countries to move forward. We still have a long way to go, but we certainly took a few steps forward.
Progress on that more than ever is important, because as we saw with the global pandemic, the digital divide is only going to increase, as is the inequities that'll reinforce. This gap will exclude some of the most vulnerable in our society. So we really do have to get this right. Almost half the world's population, the majority of whom are women in developing countries, are still offline. That's about 3.7 billion people. Even in the US, the Federal Communications Commission estimates that more than 21 million Americans don't have reliable internet.
In fact, in my studies, I was also aware of the digital divide. And part of my concern was that even and if we make progress, we have to make specific provision for closing the gender divide, is expanding access to technology while closing the digital divide. Years later, when I was at UN Women, I came into sharp contact with many people who were dealing with the issue of closing the digital divide. And even up to date, we continue to battle the digital divide. And it's important to mention that the digital divide actually has a cost. Because of digital divide, the world has left about $1 trillion on the table, $1 trillion of GDP in 120 countries, mostly least developed countries, who need this progress even much more, simply because of the gender digital divide. So closing the gender digital divide is something that we should be concerned about, not just for women's sake, which is important enough, but because the whole technology, the whole economy is affected by this discrimination.
So can you walk us through how we can start to address those issues, both on a multilateral level, at the national government level? What role do private companies and tech companies play in all of this? Can you kind of walk us through some possibilities?
The reason why I am here doing this talk here in Harvard is because myself and a friend of mine, Professor Rangita at UPenn, we wrote a paper on the role of tech leaders, because we were concerned that these leaders need to be aware of the critical role they have in society in assisting us, not just to close the digital divide, but to enable access to technology and the reach to go beyond the usual suspects. And we recognized that this is something that will need governments in terms of policies, but you're also going to need private sector, just in terms of the goods that they produce in programming, in software. You're going to need people who work in technology, to include all kinds of people, including women and people of all races and sexes. And we, as it is now, school children, which is the area that I am engaged with, by and large not exposed to technology to the extent that we want them to be exposed. At least that is the case in my country, South Africa. So my foundation actually works in that area where we train teachers to be digitally literate so that they can use their newly acquired skills in schools through their learning and teaching activities to expose other teachers and their students. And hopefully the students will take the skills home and expose their moms in particular, because if there's anybody who will be left behind by technology, it is going to be moms. So you want to complete the whole cycle. So in what we do about closing the gap, there is the multilateral space where you want to engage and speak to all countries about what they can do together, because the world is interconnected. Whatever progress we make in one country is good, not just for that country, but is also good for other countries. UN Women has generation equality, which was an important initiative to mark the 25 years of implementing the Beijing Declaration. And within generation equality, there is a focus on innovation and technology. And that innovation and technology is focused on increasing access to technology and closing the gap, the access gap by 50%, in particular, the digital gender divide. The innovation and technology is also concerned about the accountability of the tech industry and ensuring, for instance, that they deal with the online violence. And if you just think just about those two things, these are huge things that need to be done at a multilateral level, which an organization like UN Women cannot do alone. But by initiating generation equality, they have been able to reach out to private sector, governments, youth organizations, philanthropists, so that they can all work together to address this. And I hope that all of you who are in this call can join them and assist and be part of helping to close the digital divide. And of course, at country levels, each country needs to make sure that it has policies that are responding to the needs that we have, from affordability and access to data, which students and teachers and schools need very much, accessibility of connectivity, which we see and experience every day in the work that we do in UN Women. The schools that don't have connectivity are the schools that struggle a lot to be part of our program. And schools that do not have Wi-Fi are also left out because they connect. And these are some things that individual schools cannot work out just by themselves. They need the support of the authorities. And of course, in our communities, the private sector needs to see how it engages and assists and supports people in community so that they can be connected. Because in any case, if you increase the number of people who use technology, that is building a market for themselves. Because as young children or as adults, they will then expand and they will begin to buy the gadgets and the many things that the tech industry is producing and selling. But it is also important for women to be part and parcel of that tech journey. Women must be programmers, they must be software developers, they must be managers, they must be content developers. And we must make sure that there's a feminist angle in the evolution of the tech industry.
You've done a great comprehensive policy recommendation. I hope everyone took notes. Let's get on these recommendations in the way that we can. So I see we have some questions in the chat already. I'll start reading them. The first one is sort of related to what you were saying about accessibility, affordability. The question is from Carlos Carpi. He asks, could you comment on how you see financial accessibility in this process? And by this process, I think he means closing the global digital and gender divide. And how should we think of this as a related issue?
Mobile money is the thing. Absolutely. To educate whether learners or community is to prepare them to use technology in all aspects of their lives, including mobile money. It makes sure that women and communities and people in communities who struggle, for instance, to open bank accounts are empowered to open accounts on their phones with less hassle and fuss. In that way, you are increasing the number of people who are banked. This continues to be a form of discrimination because in most countries, the people who are most likely to be unbanked will be in the rural areas and in the poor communities. And mobile money helps us to close that gap. So when we talk about digital literacy and educating teachers and learners at an early age and making sure that they are digital natives, it is about preparing them for this situation because they will need money and they need to have the comfort of moving their money using their mobile phones.
That's fascinating. We also have another question related to the digital divide. So what is the scope of the responsibility of developed countries to support and assist developing nations for their digitization and connectivity?
Yeah, well, first, let me just say, I think it's important that developing countries don't only depend on what developing countries will do for them. Technology enables every country to at least take the initial steps to move forward. It's important that developing countries do not remain developing countries. The idea of being a developing country is that you are on a journey going somewhere. It should not be a permanent definition of who you are. And if you're going to depend on other countries who are already developed, it means that those people will dictate your direction and what happens to you. So, but having said that, the reality is that countries do need support. They should be able to form partnerships with both private sector and universities and countries, so as to oil their own development. And it's important also to note that these poor countries are not completely without any contribution. They also have something to contribute to this journey. So it is a two-way process. They can contribute and they can receive support that also comes from other countries. Transfer to technology, for instance, is important. The many barriers that we have, such as intellectual property, slow the pace of development for those countries that are still start in their early stages of development. Human resource is absolutely critical because it is the people who have been educated, who understand what needs to happen, who can call on their countries to make the necessary steps.
I think you could also use that argument for climate financing as well. You can kind of, there's so many different areas that developed nations should be contributing a little bit more, especially in climate where the most affected are the who have least contributed to pollution and carbon emissions. So we have another question. Gadir Kuna, she's an alumna from the Kennedy School. So she just returned from Sudan amid the current military coup, where she saw women and girls expanding their access and knowledge of the use of phones to network for the resistance efforts of the military government. How can this expansion of this simple use of digital and technology be further expanded so as to have more women contribute towards their voices in setting up policies that allow their voices and needs to be heard and adopted, not just now during the current state, but also in the future?
Well, certainly the women of Sudan deserve all our support for the heroic struggle that they have fought in their country. Again, UN Women is there alongside the women, supporting the steps that women are taking. And technology has been important for Sudan. Access to gadgets is critical to the women, and access to connectivity is also critical. Private sector that operates in Sudan, or private sector that is outside Sudan, but with the possibility of making a contribution, needs to look at how it can contribute to what is happening in Sudan. I mean, it is untenable. It almost feels like now we have a stalemate in Sudan, where the dictator was pushed out, but the one we have been waiting for has not come. And women in the main have fought, have been in the forefront of bringing about the change in Sudan. It was such a pity that when change came, women did not occupy the place you expected them to occupy. So whatever we can do for women to continue to mobilize in Sudan so that more women can continue to participate in the struggles of Sudan. Obviously, owning and using technology costs money, and money is scarce and hard to get in that part of the world. So whether through civil society organizations, through formal institutions, some of which are governments that are supporting change, let's try and see what it is that we can support and direct our support to women so that women can continue to be the leading voice in the struggle in Sudan. It's not over. It's also not fair for the people of Sudan to remain in this state forever. Something has to give in that situation.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a heroic effort over there. So we have another question. We have so many questions. This is great. So you have a very unique, so this is from Carol Bauer from South Africa. So you have a unique place in history, and it's incredible to see how you have been able to lead at a global level, but remain engaged with communities at a micro level while impacting legislation at a macro level. How is your current drive for a femme-affirmed uptake of technology in the African continent being received by the leadership of the different countries? Huge respect.
Yeah. I think the leadership in different countries is keen to see their citizens move and become digital natives. I do wish that they could be more supportive. I also know that obviously their hands are full because they have so many things that they have to do in their countries. But one of the ways in which we can support initiatives, not just mine, but initiatives of people who want to bring about help, is making sure that we encourage our civil servants to be willing to cooperate and collaborate with those who want to help them. We want to make sure that we use technology effectively, because with the technology, we are able to do so much more than what we could do before. I mean, if I look at what my foundation is able to do, we don't just train in South Africa, we train in 10 other African countries, and using the same method, the same content, the same tutors, and one class by a same group of teachers is able to cut across so many countries and so many schools. But of course, technology is not an answer to everything. Technology is an enabler. You also need to have some in-person contact with the people you are supporting and serving. And sometimes we are unable to do much more because we are not well resourced to go out and to reach out to these teachers so that you can encourage them, you can answer questions, you can also feel the dynamism of the people you are trying to support. So it's not just the help that we need from the leaders of those countries, which we also, I'm not saying that we don't need, but it's also the leadership of those people who are tech leaders and those people who have money and resources who need to invest in initiatives such as my initiatives and the initiatives of others who are providing this service to our education system.
And with, I remember we hosted Dr. Aminata Touré And she spoke a lot about how Africa has a really young population. It's like 70% is under the age of 30. So the future of the world is the future of Africa's youth and women and girls in particular.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, the UN Women reached out on the continent, helping to train African girls to code. And the way in which the girls just embrace that, and in a short space of time, you could see that these girls would have a long way to go if they continue to receive support. But obviously, the support was limited because of the resources being limited. We wished that we would have covered many more countries in this regard, as well as partner with other service providers in this field. We need to provide this support to girls because this is something that will help to keep girls at school. That is something that will rescue girls who are forced to marry, because with technology, girls have a way of continuing to follow their studies and also to understand what is happening in the world and work out ways to rescue themselves for these horrible circumstances they find themselves in. I also think about girls who are being trafficked. With access to technology and knowledge on what they can use technology for, they can connect and find their way in the world and help to get themselves out of these horrendous situations.
We have a related question from Khadija. She asked, what are some strategies you suggest or have seen work with developing local tech talent? You touched on a lot of that, but she then asks, you spoke about stronger intellectual property protections, for example. What are the actions should states do to support and incentivize local talent to stay rather than look abroad? So brain drain question.
Yeah, well, I have to say not all brain drain must be condemned, because some of the people who go out and work outside their countries actually do come back, and they come back stronger and cleverer. So that's an advantage to the country, especially in areas of technology. Sometimes what children and young people can learn in their own countries is limited. So they need to go somewhere in order to expand themselves. But we need to make sure that they can come back. We need to make sure that the policies of the countries are receptive, but we also need them to be creative and look at how they can create the space for themselves to not only be in their countries and provide services in their countries, but they can also be in their countries and provide services somewhere else in the world. We need to make sure that we don't see Silicon Valley as the melting point for everybody. Everyone can take a piece of Silicon Valley and take it with them to their village, as long as they can manage to have some connectivity. So there's a lot of critical and creative thinking that we all need in order to turn this upside down. I worry about expecting the leaders of our countries to do everything. I don't think that they are doing enough, but I also don't want us to think that we can depend on them for everything that we do. We also have to look at how we can create the opportunities we want for ourselves.
So relatedly, if it's not all up to the country governments, we have a question about the private sector. So you mentioned the private sector can benefit from an increase in the digital connectivity of women and girls, but the sector can certainly be doing more than they are right now. How can we convince them to commit funding and resources? Are there any barriers that are making them hesitant? This is from Serena Hahn.
Well, I don't even know if I know the answer to that. I think it's the golden answer, isn't it? I think it's probably the first answer that me and Rangita were trying to answer. How do we make private sector look at people all over the world as worthy people for support, and encourage private sector to invest everywhere in the country? Obviously not alone, because in some cases, the investment is likely to be, is not likely to be profitable ever. So it is the investment that you make because you believe in what has to be achieved, and that tends to require governments to do in the main. But especially coming out of COVID, the fiscal space of many governments has shrunk so much. The possibility for them to spend money expanding their infrastructure is limited. The world has changed, and the changing of the world does suggest that we cannot just expect that as citizens we'll be serviced by a bigger institution. We are the big institutions ourselves. So what does it mean that we are now in a new world? What are the things that we should be doing differently from what we did before COVID? We've seen how important technology is. We saw how some people were able to leave their jobs, take their laptops, go and sit in their kitchen and continue working. And some people lost their jobs completely and they became unemployed. How do we expand the number of people who will be able, when we have another pandemic, because it's not if we will have a pandemic, it's when we'll have another pandemic. So right now we should already be preparing ourselves for the next pandemic, but also we should be expanding the opportunities that we have for people to work in different ways. Those who want to go to work, and those who want to work under a tree, those who want to work from home, because we now have realized and recognized that work doesn't only happen when you are in an office. Again, at UN Women, during the pandemic, we shut down, the UN shut down. We're all at home, but not for one day did we ever stop working. And I even feel that during the pandemic, we worked much harder than we've ever worked before, and we produced a lot of results. So our own thinking and the way we think about the future of work has to change completely so that we can take full advantage of the opportunities that the technology opens for all of us.
So Kadir made a point in the chat that the pandemic has overly disenfranchised women. We're seeing a lot of studies come out right now how globally women have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic. They've had to stay at home and take care of their household. The numbers are pretty staggering on that. So we have a long way to go. We have a question from Francella Ochillo. She's actually an expert on the digital divide here at the Belfer Center. And she asks a question. So I appreciate your comment about the need for specificity in policy provisions. One of the continual challenges with addressing the digital divide is helping policymakers that are far removed from the consequences of disconnectedness treat this issue with a sense of urgency. Do you have any advice for empowering disenfranchised populations to be able to advocate for themselves in spite of limited political power to demand redress?
Yeah, you know, how I got interested in technology and how I ended up doing a PhD that looks into technology was because I I realized when I was in government that there is a lot that technology can do for our communities. Sitting at national government, you can be removed from the communities that you want to serve, which is why I decided that I needed to do research that really takes me into schools and communities to see how people were struggling with the use and access to technology. And I've never left. I started to do research, and since then I am forever struggling with those communities to find the solution, because you really realize how much people are struggling. And if you are not close enough to those communities, you can actually end up missing out on the many challenges that they face. So I would say to our policymakers, stay connected. It is important to go to the field, to interact, and to be in close contact with communities. There's a real danger of other international organizations, national organizations, to be far removed from the people they want to help, and to interact with them through papers, research, statements, and that does not give you the real feel of what is happening with those communities. So it is important to give yourself time to go to the communities that you want to serve, because in some ways, the more you are exposed to the problems, is the more you think of the answers. You can actually look at the problem while you are in the community and think of the answers and the interventions that you can make to help solve the problems. I mean, I don't have a perfect answer for this question, but I think you'll never go wrong if you interact with the communities.
If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to type in the chat. Thank you. So we are running up on our time. Okay, one more. Virtual reality. Virtual reality and XR is an immersive platform that could assist in connectivity to bring stakeholders together on the issues on the ground, also allow stakeholders to see challenges in the world of policymakers. Interesting point. Thank you, Karen Feinberg. So with the 5 minutes we have left, I think if nobody else has any questions, I'll take the 5 minutes. Okay, so back to zooming out. You've demonstrated how, to the point before, you can do the macro, you can do the micro, back and forth, the technical on the ground, working with communities, then zoom out and work with member states and heads of government on fixing these policies. So I'd love to know more about your time at UN Women. What was that like, leading the organization? When you were appointed as executive director, it was 2013. The organization was 2 years old. You spent 8 years there out of the 10 years that it existed. So you were actively shaping this organization as you were going. So what was that like? Under your leadership, UN Women expanded its partnerships, launched various awareness campaigns like He for She, doubled in size and revenue. So I would love to know about how you manage that organization, some lessons in leadership from your time there as well.
Well, working at UN Women was not a walk in the park, but it was also exciting. And this is because working for women is hard. Sometimes we talk about how far women have come as if we have something to celebrate. No, we don't. We still have such a long way to go. The discrimination against women is intense. the fact that we still have less than 10% of women CEO in the Fortune 500 companies is a shame. The fact that only about 25% of our members of parliament as a global average are women is a frustration. And the fact that the pandemic has worsened the situation, and the fact that 1 out of 3 women still lives with a violence. And in fact, violence against women is a pandemic. That is what we called it at the UN, that we were fighting the health pandemic, but actually violence against women continues to be a pandemic that was there before the health pandemic, that will continue even beyond the pandemic. So working at UN Women was continuously battling all these issues. And I take off my hat for my colleagues there for the energy and the courage and the kind of dedication they had to the mandate. It is something that is a fight for everybody. It is in particular a fight that men have to fight, because this is their mess. Women did not cause the challenges that we are fighting against. Women do not beat up women. Women do not rape women. Women do not deny women opportunities to lead. So we need to get women to be on our side, and to need men to be on our side, and we need them as allies and partners that can take a part in gender equality. And we must put it out there that they will not receive a prize for being allies, because they're just doing their job. We will not praise fishes for swimming. They must just swim along, because that's what is required. But if I bring it back to technology, it would be a shame if women are lost now and they are left behind in this 4th industrial revolution that we are getting into. I mean, the first revolution, which started in England, left us behind, and it fueled colonization. The second industrial revolution, which electricity drove, left women. The third revolution, which is the starting of the digital revolution, also, even though it was much easier to involve women, still left women. This revolution, the 4th industrial revolution with artificial intelligence, women have to give it their all. And I'm asking you, Erika, you and your students and everybody, let us all engage the tech community to really look at how you bring women to the center of this struggle, how we make sure that the countries that are seen as periphery, there's no one who's in periphery, there's no human being who's in the periphery, everybody is central. How we can bring everybody to be in the center and to benefit from where we go to now with the 4th industrial revolution. I rest my case.
I can't top that. So we're at time. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your experience, your guidance, your wisdom. If we could all unmute and give her a round of applause. Thank you so much, Dr. Mlambo-Ngcuka.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.